And I went out to California from there. So I've been in the Bay Area for 19 years. And even stuck with this consulting thing a bit longer. And I think, again, just without belaboring that, because I don't think it's all that interesting of a story, but generally, I took the jobs that could help me pay off my student loans as fast as I could. I took the jobs, frankly, that I felt were, whether I would acknowledge it at the time, I felt were prestigious to have and desirable certainly amongst MBAs at that time frame in the 90s. And the first thing I learned, and I learned it pretty quickly, is once you start the job, prestige doesn't mean anything. It's whether you're happy and content and learning in your job. And in the end, I really wasn't. I felt, and there's nothing wrong with it, by the way. I don't want to totally say don't go into consulting, it's awful or anything like that. But it is what it is. It's a way to experience a lot of different things and deal with people that you normally wouldn't get to at a pretty young age. But you don't get to own anything, really. And that's really the ultimate downside of consulting is you advise, but you don't get to decide or do things. And ultimately, to me, that was not, it was a great experience for a short period of time. But in any case, I did what I thought was at least the first good move, and I jumped into where I wanted to be, which was technology. Now, I jumped to a company which wasn't as obvious as it is now, which was Apple. And when I jumped there, it was not by any means the shining star that it is today. I was there in what's best described as the dark years. Those years between His Eminence being in Cupertino. And so if anything I learned, so first of all, I should say it's important to say, I probably took a 40 or 50% pay cut to do that. I didn't really care. I was sort of like, I had done the job and got rid of my loans, by the way. So I was sort of willing to do that, to sleep in my own bed in San Francisco and be able to work for a company like Apple, which was, even though we were not a winning company at the time, was just an incredible environment. But at Apple, we were in a downward spiral then. This was like the peak of Microsoft power. It's when Windows 95 came out, and if you can believe it, people stood in line to buy Windows 95, which is mind-boggling, as if it was an iPhone or something. But we were in really bad shape, and sometimes you learn the most from those types of experiences. And for sure, if there's anything that was really obvious to me then, was that we were rudderless. We had a non-technologist running a technology company. We were letting sales channels and things like that decide what we built and didn't build. And the most poignant example, I was in the consumer Mac part of Apple then. And this is way back, if you wouldn't remember this, but in the 90s, towers are really big. People were getting into gaming and how many slots a tower had and the processor speed and the RAM and the drive and all that. And it was sort of this arms war among PC makers to build towers that were really good for gaming. And these ugly things, but nobody cared because they'd have this big monitor on their desk and it would go under it. And at Apple, we had built this really neat all-in-one product, which is almost reminiscent of the original Mac. But nobody wanted it, right? The CompUSA or Best Buy, whoever all these people, the channels were, they didn't want it. They just we want towers. The market wants towers. So we built towers. And down we went. And then, finally I left and when I got there, by the way, the stock was at about $44. When I left, it was about $12. So that's about how much value I added to Apple. But Steve Jobs came back soon after I left, and the very first thing he did was he built an all-in-one and became the iMac. And so simple lesson there is, technology companies need technologists running them. They can't be rudderless, they can't be leaderless. They have to make hard decisions, they have to be opinionated and have confidence in their assessment of what the market needs. And obviously Apple has shown that ever since, and a lot of other companies as well.